As we continue to ramp up towards 8th edition, we're going to be going over why the 4th edition Codex was so darn good. Okay, so here we go. This is the 4th edition Codex. It's copyright 2007. It actually came out like the first or second week of January 2008, which happens to correspond with the time I got back into the game. I've told the story before, but I'll tell it again. Basically, after my kids got a little bit older, so I basically stopped doing anything outside the house for about 6 years while I was waiting for my kids to grow up a little bit. So once the second one got about 3 years old, Mom and I took turns going out. So she would go out with her friends on one night, and I'd go play Warhammer, or actually it was Magic at the time. I was playing Magic at the Gathering at the time, one night a week. So we'd trade off. Perfectly amicable situation. And so one night I went in to play Magic at my local gaming store, and they had a poster up starting a 40K league. Wow, I have some 40K models. And so I went home that night, dug out my box that I had all my old orcs stuffed in for the last 8 years, showed up the next Wednesday night, and I haven't stopped showing up Wednesday nights since. And this book came out literally just like a few days after that first game. So I played one game with the 3rd edition Codex after I came back, and after that it was all this book right here. And this book is really good. It's not perfect. Nothing is perfect, but it's really good. It's solid. It's balanced. There were a few things I didn't like, of course, but they are relatively minor. So, what makes this book so good? I'll tell you right here. This is Why, by Phil Kelly. That's why this book is good. So let's talk about some of the things that this did cool. Was, of course, it brought back a couple things that were old. First of all, it greatly expanded the fluff over the previous codex. There's a lot of stuff in here about the individual clans, Beast, Gazgul, Waz. Okay, so I don't know if you watched my 3rd edition codex review, but Mob Rule and Waz changed a lot. And the changes were awesome. The mob rule, where the models were simply fearless at greater than 10 models in the unit. Of course, when 4th edition was out, that wasn't necessarily a good thing, because if you lost combat and you were fearless, you took fearless wounds. So if you lose combat by 5 and you're fearless, you take 5 armor saves. So that wasn't necessarily a good thing, but fearless is outstanding. And of course, when WoW, what happens is you can declare WoW during shooting phase. And this one had Fleet of Foot, so you can re-roll your charge distances, one or both dice, or was it run and charge? I don't know, but the fleet rule changed, of course, since then. I think you could run and charge under this rule too. I don't remember what the 4th and 5th edition fleet rule was like. I know it's changed quite a bit, but anyway, you'd have fleet. And of course, everything got Furious Charge, which at the time was both strength and initiative. So strength +1, initiative 1. They took away the initiative part of it, so that's kind of disappointing. But this thing it did was it added in some of the old stuff. The shock attack gun. Can't forget about the shock attack gun. It brought in the Weird Boy. Weird Boy was not in the 3rd edition Codex. It was in the 3rd edition rulebook, though. But for some reason they didn't make it over to the Codex. So it brought some other stuff. It added Pain Boys. Of course, they're just upgrade to knobs. The trucks, it gave us this ramshackle table, which I'll get back to. There's some Ludas. Ludas, it made a Ludas, of course, one of the best shooting units in the game. Still are one of the best shooting units in the game. I mean, back in when this came out, this was probably number 2 behind the missile launcher Longfangs. And when Flyers came out, this was the number 1 anti-flyer unit, and it still is the number 1 anti-flyer unit. Ludas are just... There is nothing bad about this. They did change the... What was the biggest change? Oh, Warbikes changed a lot. Of course, they dropped in a little bit. They lost their Fearless. They lost their Psychoblast rule from the 3rd edition, which is both disappointing, because they didn't drop in price enough to counter that. The other big change, let's see, big guns, there's all the same. Of course, Killicans went from Orcs to Grots. and dropped a bit in price. Looted wagons. That was the other big change that people had a big problem with, was getting rid of the looted wagon rules. You know, I understand it. It takes away a lot of the complexity, a lot of the paperwork, but so it would have been nice if they gave us more than one option for the looted wagons, like the Rhino chassis part of it, and then maybe like an Armor 13 Lehman Russ version variant. So like 2 looted wagons would have solved that problem a lot. Or a Basilisk version, something like that. More options of looted wagon would have helped that a lot. Of course, you did lose, let's see, Captain Badrick. Gave us Wazdaka, which was a big loss in the current book. Snickrot, of course, Snickrot forever, for 4th and 5th edition, Snickrot was in basically every list I played. Because you could assault, you could come on any table edge and assault. In 8th edition, if they bring back assaulting from reserve, please, please, GW, bring back assaulting out of reserves. For the love of Mork and Gork, or Gork and Mork, bring back assaulting out of reserves. Because then Snickrot becomes useful. Even though he can't join the unit, well, he's not really an independent character. He was in this book, but he's not in this book. Anyway, Zagstruck, he got big nerf. Okay, so yeah, those were the main changes to the book. So let's go back over here. Killicans, yeah, they dropped in price and they went to Grots, which changed their profile quite a bit. So they were, instead of just being small dreads, they were different, and that was a great change. The knobs, let's see, the knobs are, of course, you lost all the troop choices, because you noticed in the previous book you had tank busters, you had stick bombs, you had a bunch of different choices for troop choices. Here we just got Boys and Gretchen. Everything was going to move from elite. Knobs, the war boss's ability to change knobs into troops, or make one unit of mega knobs or mega knobs into troops. The big mech's ability to change a dread into a troops. So the lowest legal model count army was Orks. It was two big mechs, 2 def dreads. Completely legal force Ork. Smallest model count. Yeah, so Gazgul's changed the same points, Mad Dog changed the same points. Mad Dog changed a lot. He went from like 95 to 160. And he still had that where you had to, like, he could be led around. I'm glad they got rid of that. Of course, Weird Boys have dropped in points in the new book. So, yeah. So let's talk about some of the deficiencies of this book. They're not very many. The biggest problems with this book is that these units that lack dedicated transports, the Burner Boys, the Tank Busters, the Flash Kits especially, all locked dedicated transports. That was a big problem. That was one of the biggest issues with this book. And of course, losing the looted wagon, of course, was a big hassle for a lot of people. The nerfing of the war bikers. I mean, they went from 35 to 25, and they basically weren't worth that 25 points. They were totally worth 35 at Fearless. If they had stayed 35 and stayed Fearless in this book, I would be all over it. This would have been, again, the best unit in this book too, but that was actually Luda's. So, because Fearless, I said, Fearless is an amazing role that everyone should have, or at least Orc should have. Of course, oh, the flash kits changed a lot. I forgot about that. They went to their snaz guns instead of just upgraded shooters. Oh, and they went to knob stats from boys because they were just boys with big guns. Now they were knobs. So yeah, I mean, there's really, other than that, oh, and the limiting of the heavy armor, which is 1 per unit, 1 per army. But then you could also take those as troops instead of elites. Of course, they got rid of the Scar Boys. They got rid of the Cyborgs. Not the Cyborg body, but they got rid of the Cyborg unit. They added the Def Coptas. Didn't have a decent model for it, though. Until Black Reach came out. So yeah, I mean, there's really not a lot of wrong with this book. Yes, it was, by the time 7th was around, it was getting long in the tooth. But compared to that, to the new book, if I had this book for the last 3 years, I would be loving life. Because this book is so much better than the current one. So why is this so good? The units are balanced, despite oh, and Tank Busters. The other thing was Tank Busters lacked Tank Hunter in this book. That was also kind of a problem. They had it in the previous book, they have it in the current book, but they lost it in this one. That was a minor, I don't know, but anyway, that's the number of deficiencies in this book are insignificant. So what makes this book so good is just the right combination of effectiveness and orkiness. So there are 3 main things I want to talk about. Let's go back to the shock attack gun. Where is the shock attack gun? Weird boy. Firing the shock attack gun. Okay, so the shock attack gun is pretty cheap for a large blast AP2. I played this mech thing a lot, especially in 4th edition. They had the same rule that's going to be out in 8th edition where you can't fire at characters unless it's the closest model. So a standalone shock attack gun was viable in 4th and will become viable again in 5th. As you're hearing that from me right now, the shock attack gun is anything close to useful under the new rules. You're just having a big mech with a shock attack gun sit in the back while your boys advance. It's going to be a thing again. It's going to be a good thing. So take my word for that. But anyway, so it's this large blast AP2. And even if you just rolled average, like strength 7, that's amazing. It did a lot of damage, or it could do a lot of damage. Yeah, sure, you could do funny things too, but they were just right. It was just the right amount of randomness without going to the point where you're hurting yourself more often than not. Yeah, the shock attack gun was great. I mean, these rules are great. Just the right amount of workiness to be playable and fun. Weird Boys. Again, great writing. Useful powers. 3 shooting, 3 non-shooting. Good balance. But it was random. Every turn you rolled a die to see which power you got to cast. That's amazing. The amount of orkiness in that. The amount of usefulness in that. I mean, it could be useful, could not be useful, and it could hurt you. But more often than not, it was better than nothing. It was better than not doing it. So, and the Weird Boys got to use mob rules, so they would always be on leadership 10. So, the Weird Boys, again, were a good combination of orkiness and effectiveness. And, of course, the best rule of all, Ramshackle. This, I have to say, is an example of perfect rules writing. This Ramshackle table is amazing. It's absolutely perfect. I don't think anyone ever had a problem with the Ramshackle table. The idea that a truck could go flying off in some random direction was amazing. People loved it. Orc players loved it. Their opponents loved it. And of course, there's 1/3 chance of absolutely nothing happening to the orcs. The truck just falls apart, then get out. It was amazing. So not only you have a 1/3 chance of the truck exploding and going completely somewhere where your boys are useless. It's literally standing out in the open. That happened enough where the truck would just explode in the middle of nowhere, and the boys would literally be standing there in the middle of the open, doing nothing. And then 1/3 chance of nothing happening. They just get out. No damage, no pinning, no damage. Perfect rules writing. Perfectly orky. Very effective, fun for both players. This is the best thing in this book, is this Ramshackle table. It made the trucks useful and useless at the same time, which is what you want to see. You want the randomness to be there, but not to the point where the randomness takes away from the fun of the game. This rules, the Shock Attack Gun and the Weird Boy are all perfect examples of the correct balance of orky randomness and effectiveness. That's why this book is so good. And I really, really hope we can see that in both the 8th edition stopgap book and the future codex, which probably won't be out until 2018. I don't know, does Phil Kelly even work for GW anymore? I sure hope so. If not, hopefully they'll bring him back at least to write a new Ork book for us. So that's why the 4th edition Ork Codex is amazing.